I walked onto the training field at Naval Amphibious Base Coronado at exactly 800 hours wearing a plain uniform with no visible rank insignia, no unit patches, no identification of any kind, just clean fatigues that could belong to anyone from a private to a general. My hair was pulled back in a simple ponytail. I carried a small notebook and a water bottle. To anyone watching, I looked like someone who had wandered into the wrong area by mistake. That was exactly the point. I had been conducting evaluations of special operations training programs for 15 years, and I had learned something important early in my career. The most revealing assessment of any military unit isn't how they perform when they know they're being evaluated. It's how they behave when they think nobody important is watching, how they treat people they assume are beneath them, how they react to someone who doesn't fit their mental image of what belongs in their space. So I had developed a simple test. I would arrive at a base wearing plain clothes, no obvious rank, nothing that signaled authority or expertise. Then I would observe how personnel treated me. The results told me more about organizational culture in 10 minutes than a week of official evaluations could reveal. Coronado was my third evaluation this month. JSOC had tasked me with assessing SEAL sniper training programs across all West Coast facilities. My official role was to evaluate technical proficiency, training methodology, and operational readiness. But my real job, the one that mattered most, was assessing whether these units had the cultural foundation necessary for genuine operational excellence. Because I had learned through years of combat operations that technical skill meant nothing if the culture was broken. That bias and assumption got people killed in the field, that the most dangerous vulnerability any operator could have was the inability to see clearly without prejudice. The training field was busy with activity, approximately 60 personnel moving through various evolutions. I could identify the different groups immediately. A class of Bud-S candidates running through obstacle courses, a group of more experienced SEALs conducting weapons training at the far range, and scattered throughout, the instructors who ran the programs, easily identifiable by their confidence and the way other personnel deferred to them. I walked toward the main training area where I could see the sniper range being prepared for the day's instruction. I moved with purpose, not hesitant or lost, just someone who knew where they were going and had every right to be there. 3 corporals noticed me almost immediately. They were young, probably mid-20s, with the physical confidence that came from completing Bud-S and earning their tridents. They stood near an equipment staging area, and I could see them tracking my movement across the field. One of them, a tall corporal with a name tape reading Davidson, separated from his group and walked toward me with the casual authority of someone who believed he owned this space. I continued walking at the same steady pace, watching him approach through my peripheral vision while appearing to focus on the training range ahead. He stepped into my path, forcing me to stop. His body language was non-threatening but clearly authoritative. A young operator who had been taught to control his environment and was now applying that training without really thinking about it. "Excuse me, ma'am, can I help you with something?" His tone was polite enough, but I could hear the assumption underneath. He had already decided I was someone who didn't belong here, someone who needed to be redirected to wherever lost civilians were supposed to go. I looked at him with a neutral expression, showing neither deference nor challenge. "I'm here for the sniper range training observation." My voice was calm, professional, giving him no particular reason to question my statement, but also not providing any obvious authority markers that would make him back down. Davidson glanced back at his companions, then returned his attention to me. I could see him processing my response, trying to reconcile what I had said with what he assumed about me. "Ma'am, the sniper training today is restricted to qualified SEAL personnel and authorized instructors. Are you here for the family tour? That usually meets at the visitor center around 1000. He said it kindly, genuinely trying to be helpful to someone he assumed was confused. There was no malice in his voice, just absolute certainty that I couldn't possibly be authorized to observe SEAL sniper training. "I'm exactly where I'm supposed to be, Corporal." I kept my tone even, not arguing with him, just stating a simple fact. His two companions had moved closer now, forming a loose semicircle. The second corporal, whose name tape read Martinez, spoke up with a friendly smile. "Ma'am, I think there might be some confusion. This is an active SEAL training area. It's restricted access. We'd be happy to escort you to the administrative building where you can get proper clearance if you need to be here." I appreciated that they were being polite. Some units would have been aggressive or dismissive. These young SEALs were trying to be helpful to someone they assumed was lost, but the underlying assumption was the same. They had looked at me, seen a woman in plain clothes with no obvious rank, and decided I couldn't possibly have legitimate business in their training area. I remained where I was, not moving toward the administrative building, not showing any intention of leaving. The third corporal, Williams, according to his name tape, tried a different approach. His tone was more casual, almost joking. "Look, I get it. The SEALs are cool and everyone wants to see training, but this really is a restricted area. We could get in serious trouble for having unauthorized personnel here during live fire exercises." He gestured toward the range. "How about we get you sorted out with visitor authorization? Then you can come back for an official tour. We do those sometimes for VIPs and family members." I could see genuine concern in his expression. He wasn't being condescending. He actually believed he was helping me avoid getting them all in trouble by being somewhere I wasn't supposed to be. I made a decision to push slightly harder. "I appreciate your concern, Corporal, but I'm not leaving. I'm authorized to be here, and I'm going to observe the sniper training as scheduled." That statement changed the dynamic. Now it wasn't about helping a confused civilian. Now it was about someone refusing to comply with what they believed was legitimate security protocol. Davidson's expression hardened slightly. "Ma'am, with respect, I need to see authorization. Do you have orders or a visitor pass?" "I don't need visitor authorization," I replied calmly. "Then you need to leave the training area. I'm sorry, but those are the rules." Martinez pulled out his radio, clearly preparing to call for security or a supervisor to handle the situation. I remained standing exactly where I was, my expression unchanged, watching all three of them with calm observation. I was cataloging everything: their body language, their tone, their assumptions. The fact that it hadn't occurred to any of them that I might actually belong here, that I might have authority they weren't recognizing. This was the test, not the confrontation itself, but what it revealed about how they processed information, about whether they could question their own assumptions, about whether they would verify before escalating. Williams tried once more, his voice taking on a slightly frustrated edge. "Ma'am, please. We're just trying to do our jobs. You can't be here without proper authorization. If you won't leave voluntarily, we're going to have to call the Master Chief, and this is going to become a much bigger issue. Then call him," I said simply. Martinez raised his radio, but before he could speak, a voice from across the training field cut through the morning air like a knife. The voice belonged to Master Chief Samuel Curtis, and it carried a tone I had only heard a few times in my career. Not anger, not quite panic. Something closer to horror mixed with disbelief. "Reaper 6 is on the field." The effect was instantaneous and total. Every instructor within hearing distance stopped moving. Conversations died mid-sentence. A lieutenant who had been walking toward the range froze in place. The three corporals in front of me went completely still, their faces showing confusion that was rapidly transforming into dawning realization that something was very, very wrong. Master Chief Curtis was running toward us, his stride covering ground fast despite his age. Behind him, I could see other senior instructors turning to look, their expressions showing the same shocked recognition. The three corporals stood frozen still, processing what they had heard. They knew the call sign, Reaper 6. Every SEAL knew that call sign, even if most of them thought it was a legend or an amalgamation of multiple operators rather than a single person. And they were beginning to understand that the woman they had been trying to escort off the training field might be that legend. Curtis reached us and came to immediate attention, rendering a salute that was crisp and formal despite the fact that he had just sprinted 50 yards. I returned the salute, my movements precise. "Ma'am," Curtis said, his voice tight with controlled stress. "We weren't informed you had arrived. I apologize for any confusion. No apology necessary, Master Chief. I arrived early and wanted to observe the training area before the official briefing." Curtis turned to look at the 3 corporals, who were standing absolutely motionless, their faces showing the slow-motion horror of people realizing they had made a catastrophic error in judgment. "Did these corporals interfere with your observation, ma'am?" I looked at Davidson, Martinez, and Williams. Their faces had gone pale. They stood rigid, probably running through every word they had said in the past 5 minutes, understanding now that they had been trying to escort one of the most accomplished special operations personnel in U.S. military history off a training field because they assumed she didn't belong there. They were doing their jobs as they understood them, Master Chief. They saw someone without obvious authorization and attempted to maintain security protocol. That's appropriate behavior. Curtis didn't look relieved by my answer. If anything, he looked more concerned. "Ma'am, they should have verified before assuming—" "They made assumptions based on appearance," I interrupted gently. "That's exactly what I came here to observe." I turned to address the 3 corporals directly. "You saw a woman in plain clothes and decided I couldn't possibly have legitimate business in a SEAL training area. You were polite about it, which I appreciate. But you never once considered that your initial assessment might be wrong. You never verified. You never questioned your own assumptions." Davidson found his voice, though it came out hoarse. "Ma'am, we didn't know who you were." "That's the point, Corporal. You didn't know who I was, but instead of finding out, you made a decision based on what you assumed. In a training environment, that's embarrassing. In a combat environment, that assumption gets people killed." More personnel had gathered now, maintaining a respectful distance but clearly aware that something significant was happening. Word was spreading fast through the base. The legendary Reaper 6 was here, and she had just been told to leave by 3 corporals who didn't recognize her. Martinez spoke up, his voice shaking slightly. "Ma'am, I apologize. We made a mistake. You should have verified before assuming," I said, not unkindly. "You should have. Considered that someone on this training field might be here for legitimate reasons, even if they don't look like what you expect. You should have questioned whether your first impression was accurate." I looked at all 3 of them. The enemy doesn't announce themselves. Assets in the field don't always look like operators. The person who can save your life might be someone you would otherwise dismiss as irrelevant. If you can't see past surface appearance, you're operating blind. Curtis was watching me carefully, clearly trying to assess how I wanted this situation handled. I made my decision. "Master Chief, these 3 corporals are going to be assigned to me for the next 30 days. They'll assist with my evaluation, carry equipment, observe training, and learn what it means to operate without assumptions." Curtis nodded immediately. "Yes, ma'am. I'll have orders cut within the hour." I looked at Davidson, Martinez, and Williams. "Report to the sniper range at 05:30 tomorrow morning. Bring notepads. You're going to learn why everything you assumed about me was wrong, and you're going to learn why those assumptions are tactical vulnerabilities that could cost lives in the field." The 3 corporals stood at attention. "Yes, ma'am," they said in unison, their voices showing a mixture of shame, fear, and the beginning of understanding that they had just been given an opportunity that most SEALs would never receive. 30 days learning from Reaper 6 herself. 30 days that would either transform them into better operators or break them completely. I turned and walked toward the sniper range, leaving behind 3 young SEALs processing the fact that they had just failed a test they didn't know they were taking, and that their real education was about to begin. I walked to the sniper range and set up my observation position on the elevated platform that overlooked the training area. From here, I could see the entire facility. target positions extending out to 2,000 meters across varied terrain, wind flags at 100-meter intervals, the sophisticated computer systems that tracked every shot and provided instant feedback to shooters and instructors. It was a well-designed range. Whoever had built this understood precision shooting, but equipment and facilities meant nothing if the culture was broken. And what I had just witnessed with those 3 corporals told me this base had the same problem I had seen at dozens of other facilities over the years. People made assumptions. They saw what they expected to see instead of what was actually in front of them, and they never questioned whether their first impression might be incomplete or entirely wrong. I had spent 15 years using those assumptions as weapons. Being underestimated had saved my life more times than I could count. Enemy combatants who dismissed me as irrelevant, assets who talked freely around me because they didn't perceive threat, targets who never saw me coming because I didn't fit their mental image of danger. But seeing those same assumptions in our own personnel was different. It wasn't a tactical advantage, it was a fundamental weakness that compromised operational effectiveness. Let me tell you who I actually am, since those 3 corporals are going to spend the next 30 days learning it the hard way. My name is classified, has been for 15 years. The people who need to know it have the clearance to access my file. Everyone else knows me by my operational call sign, REAPER 6. I earned that call sign during my 3rd deployment to Afghanistan when I was 27 years old. I had already completed 2 tours as a conventional sniper, racking up confirmed kills and gaining a reputation for making shots other snipers said were impossible. But my 3rd deployment was different. I was recruited into a program that officially doesn't exist, a JSOC initiative to develop precision shooters who could operate in denied areas where conventional special operations forces couldn't go. The program needed operators who could blend in, who could move through hostile territories without triggering the threat recognition that conventional forces generated, who could be invisible until the moment they took the shot. I was perfect for it, because I had spent my entire military career being invisible, not by choice initially, but by necessity. When you're a woman in a special operations community that doesn't quite know what to do with you, you learn to be very good at not being noticed, at doing your job so well that people can't ignore your results even if they want to ignore you. The program trained me in tradecraft that went beyond conventional sniper skills, deep cover operations, cultural adaptation, language skills, intelligence, gathering. I learned to live in hostile territories for months at a time, establishing cover identities, gathering intelligence, and when the moment came, eliminating high-value targets with precision that left no trace of American involvement. My first classified mission was in Yemen. I spent 4 months living in Sana'a under a cover identity as a European aid worker. I wore hijab. I spoke Arabic with a Levantine accent. I attended mosque. I integrated into the community so thoroughly that even neighbors who saw me every day never suspected I was anything other than what I appeared to be. The target was a bomb maker who had killed 17 people in attacks across the Middle East and was planning operations that would have killed hundreds more. He was too well protected for conventional raids, too careful for drone strikes. The only way to eliminate him was up close, from a position nobody would suspect. I made the shot from 400 meters using a suppressed rifle from the window of an apartment I had rented specifically for that purpose. The bullet passed through a gap of less than 6 inches between buildings, through an open window, and struck the target while he sat at his kitchen table building another bomb. He died instantly. I disassembled my rifle, packed it into an aid worker's supply case, and left the country within 8 hours. The local authorities ruled it an internal dispute. Nobody ever suspected an American operator. That was my first confirmed kill in the program. Over the next 15 years, there would be more than 200 others. I operated in 17 countries across 4 continents. Some missions lasted days, others lasted months. I eliminated terrorist leaders, weapons traffickers, intelligence operatives working against American interests, and threats that will never be publicly acknowledged. I lived under so many different identities that sometimes I had to remind myself which one was real. I spoke 6 languages fluently and could pass as a native speaker in 4 of them. I had been a journalist, an aid worker, a teacher, a businesswoman, a refugee, and a dozen other covers that allowed me to get close to targets who never saw me as a threat. Because that's the fundamental truth about what I do. The most effective weapon I possess isn't my rifle or my technical shooting skills, though those are exceptional. My most effective weapon is the fact that people underestimate me. They see a woman of average height and build, unremarkable appearance, and they make assumptions about what I'm capable of. Those assumptions create opportunities, gaps in security, moments of inattention, windows where targets are vulnerable, because nobody is watching the person they don't perceive as dangerous. I had become very, very good at being underestimated, but my role had evolved over the years. JSOC didn't just want me operating in the field anymore. They wanted me training the next generation of precision shooters, teaching them not just the technical skills of long-range shooting, but the mental discipline and cultural awareness that made the difference between good snipers and exceptional ones. So I spent half my time now conducting evaluations and training programs across all special operations branches. I assessed sniper programs, identified weaknesses, recommended improvements, and taught advanced courses to operators who had already completed conventional training. And everywhere I went, I conducted the same test. I would arrive in plain clothes, no obvious rank or authority, and observe how personnel treated me, how quickly they made assumptions, whether they questioned those assumptions, how they reacted to someone who didn't fit their expectations. The results were depressingly consistent. Most personnel failed the test. They saw what they expected to see and never looked deeper. Young operators were the worst, full of confidence and certainty that they knew what an elite warrior looked like. Those 3 corporals this morning were typical, polite, professional, absolutely certain that I didn't belong on their training field. They had never considered that the woman in plain fatigues might be the most accomplished operator on the entire base. That was what I was here to fix, not through punishment or humiliation, though there would be some of that, but through teaching, through showing them that their assumptions were vulnerabilities, that in combat the person you underestimate might be the enemy who kills you or the asset who saves you. Master Chief Curtis found me on the observation platform an hour later. He carried a tablet with personnel files and training schedules. "Ma'am, I've pulled the records for Corporals Davidson, Martinez, and Williams. All 3 are solid operators. Good training scores, no disciplinary issues, strong peer evaluations." He paused. "They made a stupid mistake this morning, but they're not bad SEALs." "I know, Master Chief. If they were bad SEALs, I wouldn't waste time training them. But they have a blind spot that could get people killed in the field. That's what we're going to fix." Curtis pulled up their training records on his tablet. Davidson is your classic physical specimen, 6'2", 220 pounds, maxes every PT test. He's been a SEAL for 3 years and is being considered for advanced sniper training. "Let me guess," I said. "He believes physical dominance equals combat effectiveness." Curtis nodded. "Martinez is smaller, but technically excellent. Top marks in navigation, communications, tactical planning, very detail-oriented. But he makes assumptions about people based on their appearance." "Yes, ma'am. And Williams?" "Williams is the team player, good at everything, not exceptional at anything. Keeps his head down, follows orders, doesn't rock the boat. So he goes along with the group even when the group is wrong." "Exactly." I looked at the 3 personnel files, studying the photos and service records of the young SEALs who would be learning from me for the next 30 days. "Perfect," I said. "Each of them has a different weakness, but they all share the same fundamental problem. They trust their first impressions without verification. They assume capability can be determined by appearance. They've never learned that the most dangerous people rarely look dangerous." Curtis was quiet for a moment. "Ma'am, can I ask you something?" "Of course. Why do you do this?" The whole arrival in plain clothes, letting people assume you're nobody important, waiting for them to make mistakes. You could just arrive in uniform with your credentials visible and conduct a normal evaluation. I could, but then I'd only see what they wanted me to see. Everyone performs when they know they're being evaluated. I need to see how they actually behave when they think nobody important is watching. I gestured toward the training field where the 3 corporals were going through their regular duties, probably still processing what had happened that morning. Those 3 young men were polite to me, professional, even kind in their own way. They genuinely thought they were helping a lost civilian, but they made a tactical error that reveals a deeper problem, which is they couldn't conceive of the possibility that a woman in plain clothes might outrank and outperform every SEAL on this base. That blind spot exists because nobody has challenged it. Nobody has shown them why it's wrong. Curtis nodded slowly. "And you're going to show them. I'm going to try. Some people can't learn this lesson. Their egos won't allow it. But these 3 seem like they have potential. They were wrong, but they weren't malicious. That's a starting point. What's the training plan for the next 30 days? I pulled up my own tablet and showed Curtis the curriculum I had developed. Week 1, they observe. They watch me shoot. They see what precision at the highest level actually looks like. They learn that their assumptions about my capabilities were completely wrong. Week 2? Week 2, they learn the technical skills, ballistics, wind reading, range estimation, all the fundamental sniper competencies. But more importantly, they learn the mental discipline, how to see without prejudice, how to assess without assumption. Curtis scrolled through the rest of the training plan. Week 3 is cultural operations and intelligence gathering. Week 4 is practical application and evaluation. Exactly. By the end of 30 days, they'll either have transformed into better operators who understand that capability transcends appearance, or they'll have washed out because they couldn't overcome their biases. Curtis looked concerned. And if they wash out, then they're not suitable for the kind of operations that require operating in denied areas where blending in and being underestimated are tactical necessities. They can still be good SEALs, but they won't be great special operators. I closed my tablet, but I don't think they'll wash out. They made a mistake born of ignorance, not malice. That's fixable. The question is whether they're humble enough to learn. The next morning at 5:30, I stood at the sniper range waiting for my 3 new students to arrive. The sun was just beginning to rise over the California coast, casting long shadows across the training field. At 05:27, 3 figures appeared, moving at a fast jog toward the range. Davidson, Martinez, and Williams arriving early, showing the kind of discipline that suggested they were taking this seriously. They stopped in front of me and came to attention. I looked at each of them, letting the silence extend for several seconds, making them wait, making them think about what had happened yesterday and what was about to begin. Finally, I spoke. For the next 30 days, you belong to me. You will observe everything I do. You will learn from everything you see. And you will discover that every assumption you made about me yesterday was wrong. I gestured toward the range. You thought I didn't belong on a SEAL training field because I'm a woman in plain clothes with no obvious rank. You assumed I needed help finding the visitor center. You decided I couldn't possibly be authorized to observe sniper training. The 3 corporals stood rigid, their faces showing shame. All of those assumptions were based on your preconceptions about what an elite operator looks like. Today, I'm going to begin destroying those preconceptions. I picked up the rifle I had positioned on the shooting platform, a custom .338 Lapua Magnum that I had been using for 12 years. The weapon had been with me through operations in 8 countries and had more than 80 confirmed kills to its history. Target at 1,800 meters. Do any of you see it? The 3 corporals looked downrange through their spotting scopes, searching for the target. Davidson spoke first. I see it, ma'am. Barely visible at that distance. What's the wind condition? Martinez had been watching the wind flags. Variable 3 to 6 miles per hour, left to right, ma'am. I settled into my shooting position without another word, controlled my breathing, made my calculations, adjusted for wind, distance, temperature, humidity, elevation, and squeezed the trigger. Through their spotting scopes, all 3 corporals watched the target explode at 1,800 meters. Perfect center mass hit. I stood up and looked at them. For the next 30 days, I'm going to show you what actual elite-level precision shooting looks like. I'm going to teach you skills that will make you better operators. But more importantly, I'm going to teach you why your assumptions are the most dangerous weapons you carry. I picked up another rifle. And by the end of these 30 days, you're going to understand that the most effective operators are the ones nobody sees coming. Their education had begun. The first week was designed to shatter every assumption those 3 corporals had carried onto the training field. I didn't lecture them about bias or prejudice. I simply showed them what 15 years of operating at the highest level actually looked like. Day 1, I made 37 shots at distances ranging from 800 to 2,200 meters. Every single shot was a kill. Center mass hits, headshots on partially obscured targets, moving targets at distances most snipers wouldn't attempt. I never missed once. Davidson, Martinez, and Williams took turns on the spotting scope, calling out hits, recording data, slowly processing what they were witnessing. After the final shot, Davidson spoke quietly. "Ma'am, I've been through SEAL sniper training. I've observed some of the best shooters in the Navy. I've never seen anyone shoot like this. I was cleaning my rifle with methodical precision. That's because you've never observed someone who has made over 200 combat kills in 17 different countries under conditions that would have gotten conventional snipers killed. Yesterday, you assumed I didn't belong on this training field. Today, you watched me demonstrate skills you didn't know were possible. That gap between your assumption and reality is what I'm here to teach you about." Day 2, I brought in 3 female snipers from other Special Operations units. Captain Sarah Chen from Army Special Forces, Gunnery Sergeant Lisa Park from Marine Scout Sniper Program, Lieutenant Jessica Morrison from a classified Navy program. All 3 were smaller than any male SEAL on base. None looked like stereotypical warriors. And all 3 outshot 90% of the male instructors at Coronado. I watched Davidson's face as Captain Chen, 5'4" and maybe 130 pounds, made a perfect headshot at 1,900 meters in shifting wind. His mental framework was cracking. Everything he believed about physical size and combat effectiveness was being challenged by direct observation. Day 3, I showed them footage from my unclassified missions. Video of me operating in Yemen dressed in hijab, speaking Arabic, completely integrated into a community where I gathered intelligence for 4 months before eliminating a target. Conventional forces couldn't touch. Operations in Pakistan, Afghanistan, Somalia, Syria. Each required me to blend into environments where conventional operators would have been identified and killed within hours. Williams asked the question I had been waiting for. "Ma'am, how did you survive operating alone in hostile territories for months without backup?" "I survived because people underestimated me. They saw what they expected to see, a European aid worker, a journalist, a teacher. They never looked deeper because I didn't trigger their threat recognition. Day 4, I brought them to the kill house for close-quarters combat. I paired Davidson against Gunnery Sergeant Park in controlled sparring. Parky was 7 inches shorter and 80 pounds lighter than Davidson. By conventional thinking, he should have dominated easily. Instead, Park submitted him 3 times in 5 minutes, using superior technique, leverage, and tactical thinking. After the 3rd submission, I called a halt. "Corporal Davidson, what did you learn? That size and strength don't determine the outcome if the other person has better technique and knows how to use my advantages against me." "Correct. In the field, you'll encounter enemies who are bigger and stronger. You'll also encounter assets and allies who look weak but possess skills you can't imagine. If you judge capability by appearance, you'll make tactical errors that cost lives. Week 2 focused on technical skill development. I taught them advanced shooting techniques beyond conventional training, extreme distance shooting, moving target engagement, precision shooting in urban environments. But I also taught mental discipline required to operate alone in denied territories, how to maintain cover identities for extended periods, how to make life or death decisions with no support. Martinez excelled at this phase. His analytical mind adapted quickly to complex decision-making frameworks. By day 10, he was solving tactical problems that would have stumped him a week earlier. Week 3 was cultural operations training. I taught them how I had developed and maintained cover identities in 17 countries, the small details that made covers believable, the psychological techniques for staying in character for months, the cultural knowledge necessary to blend into communities without triggering suspicion. Williams surprised me by being best at this. His tendency to blend into groups became a strength. He had natural ability to observe social dynamics and adapt his behavior to different contexts. On day 22, I set up the real test. I brought in Dr. Sarah Mitchell, who presented herself as a middle-aged academic cultural anthropologist. She wore glasses, had graying hair, looked exactly like what she claimed to be. I assigned the 3 corporals to work with her on planning a theoretical Syria operation. They spent 4 hours developing mission parameters with her. Dr. Mitchell played her role perfectly. She asked seemingly naive questions, made suggestions that appeared to lack operational understanding, presented herself as an academic trying to help military personnel, but not really understanding their world. At the end, I asked each corporal privately what they thought of Dr. Mitchell. Davidson said she seemed knowledgeable about culture, but lacked tactical awareness. Martinez said she had good intentions, but probably shouldn't be involved in actual operational planning. Williams said she was nice, but he wasn't sure how her knowledge translated to field operations. All 3 had failed the test. I called them together and asked Dr. Mitchell to join us. Gentlemen, this is Sarah Mitchell, but that's not her real name, which remains classified. She's not actually a cultural anthropologist. Dr. Mitchell is a CIA case officer who has run operations in Syria, Iraq, Lebanon, and Yemen for 18 years. She speaks 5 languages fluently. She has recruited and handled more than 30 intelligence assets in hostile territories. The 3 corporals stared as Dr. Mitchell removed her glasses and subtly shifted her posture. Suddenly, the mild-mannered academic was gone, replaced by someone who radiated quiet competence and authority. You just spent 4 hours with one of the most accomplished intelligence officers in the CIA, and all 3 of you dismissed her as someone who lacked operational understanding. Why? Because she looked like an academic. This is exactly what you did to me on day 1. After 3 weeks of training, you still made assumptions based on appearance. Davidson looked genuinely stricken. Ma'am, we failed. Yes, but failure is part of learning. The question is whether you understand why you failed and what you need to change. Over the final week, I pushed them harder with more practical exercises designed to challenge their assumptions. By day 28, something had fundamentally shifted. They stopped making immediate judgments. They asked more questions. They verified before assuming. On the final day, I took them back to the sniper range where we had started. I want each of you to make one shot and tell me what you've learned. Davidson set up for 1,600 meters. Ma'am, I learned that I was arrogant and blind. I believed physical capability equaled combat effectiveness. I assumed I could assess people accurately based on appearance. I was wrong about all of it. You taught me that the most dangerous people rarely look dangerous, and that my assumptions were tactical vulnerabilities that could get people killed. He took his shot. Perfect center mass hit. Martinez went next at 1,700 meters. I learned that analytical skills are worthless if they're based on flawed premises. You taught me to question my own assumptions before I trust my analysis. His shot was equally perfect. Williams set up for 1,900 meters. I learned that going along with the group is comfortable but dangerous. You taught me that the most important contribution I can make is challenging assumptions when I see them, even if that means standing alone." He took his shot. Perfect hit. I stood and faced them. "You came here as corporals who made a mistake born of ignorance. You're leaving as operators who understand that capability transcends appearance, that assumptions are vulnerabilities, and that the most effective warriors are often the ones nobody sees coming." I handed them each evaluation folders. "You've completed the training successfully. Return to your regular duties tomorrow, but carry these lessons for the rest of your careers. And whenever you encounter someone who doesn't fit your expectations, remember the woman you tried to escort." Off a training field. "Thank you, ma'am, for teaching us instead of destroying us." I nodded. "Teach others what you learned here. That's how culture changes." 5 years after that morning at Coronado, the culture had changed in ways I could measure. I stood on a training field at Fort Bragg conducting another evaluation, wearing the same plain uniform with no visible rank. But this time was different. A young ranger candidate saw me and asked if I needed directions. When I said I was exactly where I needed to be, he didn't argue. He verified with his squad leader, confirmed I was authorized, and returned to training. Small moment, significant change. I had stayed in contact with Davidson, Martinez, and Williams. All three had taken what they learned and made it central to how they operated and taught. Davidson was now a senior chief running advanced sniper training. He began every course by challenging students' assumptions about what elite operators looked like, bringing in operators who defied stereotypes and letting their performance shatter preconceptions. Martinez had moved into intelligence operations, where his analytical skills and awareness of bias made him exceptional. He had written a training manual on avoiding analytical assumptions now used across multiple agencies. Williams had become a Bud S instructor specializing in cultural awareness and team dynamics, teaching young SEALs that the most valuable team members were often the ones who questioned whether the group was seeing clearly. All three credited their 30 days with me as the turning point in their careers. They had taken their failure and transformed it into expertise they now shared with hundreds of other operators. 6 months ago, I was embedded with a joint task force in North Africa. The commander, Lieutenant Colonel Stevens, had requested my participation specifically. What he didn't know was that I was also evaluating whether the lessons about assumptions had actually taken root in operational units. During a planning session, a young lieutenant suggested dismissing intelligence from a local woman because she was just a shopkeeper who couldn't possibly have significant information. Stevens stopped the briefing immediately. "Lieutenant, that shopkeeper has provided intelligence that prevented 2 attacks and led to 3 high-value target eliminations. She has access to information we can't get precisely because she's a shopkeeper people talk to without guarding their conversations. Don't make assumptions about who can provide valuable intelligence based on their role or appearance." After the briefing, Stevens approached me. "I attended one of your training courses 3 years ago. Changed how I think about assessment and assumptions. I've been implementing those principles with every unit I've commanded since." He showed me operational statistics. Since implementing cultural awareness training based on my methods, his task force had increased intelligence gathering effectiveness by 37%, asset recruitment by 42%, and mission success rate from 73 to 91%. Those numbers represented lives saved, operations succeeded, real-world impact beyond teaching moments on training fields. JSOC had taken notice. They were expanding the training programs, making them mandatory for all special operations personnel, integrating the principles into basic operator training. The culture was changing, slowly, unevenly, with resistance in some quarters, but changing nonetheless. 3 weeks ago, I received an email from a young female Marine sniper I had never met. She wrote, "Ma'am, when I showed up for sniper training, I expected to be dismissed because I'm a woman. Instead, the instructors treated me based on my performance. They pushed me harder because they said you had taught them that assumptions about physical capability were excuses for accepting lower performance. I graduated top of my class. That wouldn't have been possible 5 years ago. Thank you for changing the culture. That was the real victory. Not the operations I had conducted or the targets I had eliminated, but the thousands of operators who were now better at their jobs because they had learned to see clearly without bias. Last month, I attended Master Chief Curtis's retirement ceremony. He told the story of that morning at Coronado, then said, "The most important operations are the ones that change how we think. Reaper 6 transformed our culture more effectively than any policy directive could have. She showed us that our assumptions were weaknesses, and she taught operators who went on to teach others, creating a ripple effect that has made our entire community more effective." I spent my final year developing comprehensive training curriculum that could be implemented without requiring me to personally teach every course. Training instructors, building systems that would outlive my active service. On my last day of evaluation work, I returned to Coronado. Same test. A corporal named Chen approached me. "Ma'am, are you the JSOC evaluator? I can escort you to the range if you'd like." As we walked, Chen said, "Master Chief Williams told us about you, said you might visit. Your methods changed everything about how we train. We don't make assumptions about capability based on appearance anymore. The whole culture is different." Williams was now a Master Chief running the sniper program. He showed me what they had built. The curriculum incorporated everything I had taught. Female students fully integrated. Smaller operators taught techniques leveraging precision over strength. Every student went through exercises designed to challenge preconceptions. It was everything I had hoped for. The lessons institutionalized, the culture transformed, the work continuing without requiring my presence. Williams handed me training data from the past 5 years. Every metric had improved: mission success rates, intelligence gathering, asset recruitment, cultural integration. "This is excellent work," I said. "It's your work, ma'am. We're just implementing what you taught us." I shook my head. "It's our work. Yours, mine, and hundreds of other operators who learned these lessons and spread them. Culture change doesn't happen through one person. It happens through collective commitment to something better." I looked at the training field one last time. Keep teaching. Keep challenging assumptions. Keep showing the next generation that capability transcends appearance. "We will, ma'am. I promise." I drove away knowing my active evaluation work was complete. The lessons had taken root. The systems were in place to sustain the transformation. As I thought about the path from that first morning to today, I felt something I rarely allowed myself. Satisfaction, not in the operations I had conducted, but in the cultural transformation that would outlive me, in the thousands of operators who now saw more clearly, judged more fairly, and operated more effectively because they had learned to question their assumptions. That was the real legacy of Reaper 6. Not the legend of an invisible sniper with hundreds of kills, but the reality of a transformed culture, where capability mattered more than appearance, where assumptions were recognized as vulnerabilities, and where the most effective operators understood that being underestimated was a tactical advantage. The work would continue long after I moved on, and that was exactly what I had always hoped for.